Hi everyone, and welcome to 5 Secrets to Stunning Renderings. I'm Vanessa DeKukuk, the product manager for Design Flex, and we're going to be looking at a presentation that we introduced at KBIS 2026 when Design Flex version 14.8 was released. I'm really excited for this release because there's a ton of new enhancements that come around how we present to clients and how we get the best expectations of our visuals as we are working in our design software. So today's presentation is broken down into 5 different areas. I'll start at the beginning. We're going to talk a lot about the new rendering engine cycles and make sure you're leveraging that. It will give you the best quality that we have available. We'll talk a little bit about lighting because there are some techniques on how to get the light to work just the way you might want. It's very dependent on your space, but we'll take a look at that. Then we'll take a look at the fast mode and textures with edges, some of the new features that came with this latest update with cycles. And then also some new default textures, talk about the cloud textures, and then finally, how do we present all of this the fastest and most efficient? We will take a look at that at the very end. So to get started, like I mentioned, I will be demonstrating all of this in version 14.8 of Design Flex. And one of the key things you need to make sure that you start with is the right rendering engine. So every time I go in to create a perspective, you're going to notice that it does generate fairly quickly. We'll talk about the quality and get that all set up in a second. But the reason it's so fast is because in my preferences, my rendering preference specifically is set to cycles. Cycles should be on by default if you're running on version 14.8, but you still do have access to the older rendering engines, Easy Render and Redway, if you need, but I think you'll really like cycles once you know exactly how it works. When we go into a cycles render, it does happen pretty quick, but you will want to leverage the high quality button to really add the definition and get the clarity of a final render when you're getting ready to present. That's with the last button on the dashboard. That little camera does the high quality mode. We'll talk about all the settings behind that as we go through this course. But as you can see, here's a good representation of what a final render could look like on my machine, for example. When we look at that final render, I mean, just being able to see the level of depth that you get in some of the textures, especially like the wood texture. Now, let's admit that some of the textures, there's a lot of attention to detail in this particular render where, for example, there's a backsplash tile that was applied using the surface tool, and that backsplash tile does have a sheen to it, so it does reflect really well. So when you've got things like the sunlight coming in, you're going to notice a lot of that reflection really adds realism to the project. The more detail you put, obviously the better to get that final render. Not every single project do you have time to do every detail, or maybe need to, depending on who this is being presented to. So just kind of keep that in mind. We will look at a couple different projects through this session, but this one shows really well because of, you know, the whole entire thing is complete. The other thing I want to mention though is behind the scenes, I've noticed that sometimes there's some things kind of out of our control that can be a little frustrating at times. So for example, I am back in the software and I'm going to jump out to our support center for just a second. And I want to mention a couple things. When I'm on the support center, and I just got to that through the help menu, do you notice that some of our promoted articles are things about a graphics card, how to optimize the graphics card, how to update your AMD graphic card driver, how to update your NVIDIA graphic card driver. Don't worry, you don't have to know a whole lot about all of these details, but here's the important thing to know. One, we have it all documented for you. So if you're not sure which one of these you have, you can always click in these articles and it gives you a little step-by-step on how to go into the task manager on your computer to learn which driver you are working with. And I just want to point out too that there is a fix for the NVIDIA driver specifically that I find even on my computer, I have to do this every once in a while to make sure that I've got everything just right, what happens behind the scenes is sometimes a Microsoft update will set some things back to default, for example. And notice in our maintenance tools, we have a way that you can go in and right click and run the NVIDIA driver fix. It literally takes a second, but it does fix some of the issues that come up. Most often, that issue could be like a really dull rendering, one that just never seems to completely update or finish rendering. If you come across that, you can always run this NVIDIA driver fix. The other thing I want to notice is anytime you have issues like this is when I go to the support center or if I go to live chat, notice that with built right into the support center in the bottom right hand corner is a little chat bubble. And in this chat, by default, it will use an AI search to help you find certain details. So if you're like, you know what, I haven't updated my machine in a while, and I don't know if I need a driver update, let me just type in those words, driver update. This will search across our current documentation to find any articles related to those words. So whether you're trying to find a step-by-step article, or in my case, just simply see, am I on the latest and greatest, and did I see the article? There's a lot of different ways to get to this, and it will try to guide you to the right place. Now, of course, if you have additional questions, you can also chat with a live agent too in this chat on our support center. But I like to point this out because it's super fast and resourceful to be able to get to those things. And it's often, something that I don't want to take a whole lot of time for. I just want to find it really quick. So if you ever have any trouble, or if you're looking at my screen and you're like, hey, my renders don't look like that, and they never have, you might have to do a quick driver update or that quick NVIDIA driver fix to make sure that everything is up and running correctly. Okay, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the next topic. Now that we've got Cycles on, so Cycles, that rendering engine, is something that you'll see in a lot of our different tools across Syncly, and it's actually really powerful because it leverages our GPU instead of using the CPU. It should work really fast, it should give you great renderings, but there's a couple other pieces to this puzzle of rendering, and one of those pieces is lighting. So let's talk a little bit about what to think about when we are trying to light a space. First, you need to actually think about your architecture. So notice that this little technique, it says define the space, closed rooms, doors, and windows. When you think of a closed room, think of 4 walls at a minimum or some sort of enclosure. The more you can draw that space, the better that's defining the area in which you're telling the software to light. If you are drawing just, let's say, the 2 walls, the perimeter walls where the cabinets are, and you don't draw the other walls, what happens is the light tries to continue to light forever and ever and ever in a big open space that we're not even utilizing in the software. So the first rule of thumb, whenever possible, try to draw a closed room, and it will just really allow you to control the lighting within that room better than if you leave it open or if you just draw 1 or 2 walls. 2, now look at where the doors and windows are. And I've kind of pointed them out on this plan. Just know there's a window over the sink, a door, like a patio door going out to a backyard, and then 2 doorways on that south wall. And these are important because they will naturally allow you to let light into the space, whether or not you're using the sun. Now, I'll show you how to use the sun in just a minute, but in this particular layout, I should be able to get a pretty good lit room without adding a whole lot of extra lighting. Of course, I'll show you how to add lighting as well, but in many cases, if I draw a closed room and I have any sort of doors or windows, chances are I'm going to have a pretty well lit space, because one of the things that Cycles does is it does try to auto calculate a lot of the lighting around that space, and a lot of the auto calculation that works the best is through things like doors and windows. So now here's a couple techniques. Oh yes, of course, here's the final render, just so we know what that looks like large, and notice how nice the sun looks coming in that one window that we can see a lot of detail on. Now, how that sun plays in to the space is really controlled by you. So here's an illustration of what I mean by that. When you go to add the sun, and we'll do this step by step in just a second, but there's a little bit of a technique on where the sun is placed to be able to get the type of sun coloring that you want. And when I say coloring, think of like early in the morning or late in the evening at sunset, you tend to get those like really nice glows that are really, really warm, like this orange sunset you can even kind of see in the reflection of the refrigerator, versus if I have a sun at like 12 o'clock or right above my building, you don't get as much clarity or as much warmth. You actually get these really cool tones. So when we turn on the sun, notice that this first illustration shows the sun on the floor plan just smack dab right above the project. That is going to usually give you a really cool lighting effect, and cool as in cold or blue. And then if I pull the sun just a bit away from the center of my project, it starts to get more in the neutral tones, kind of the nice bright sunny, but not too warm, not too cold. But if I let the sun go all the way to the edge of my screen, it will get really, really warm. And notice when I was going and pulling my sun away from my project, I was pulling it away from the most important window. And to me, the most important window was the one above the sink. If I had windows on the south end of the project, I could choose to pull the sun down or to the right or to the left. The only reason I'm going up is because I want it to kind of pour into that that window that's above the sink, just so I can add that little bit of a dramatic effect of the sun coming in. But as I pull the sun away from the project, away from the drawing, the warmer it's going to tend to get. So look at how different these can result at the end. When I have that really blue, cool undertone because my sun is right above the project, that white almost looks like a really, really light blue. If I pull the sun away from the project a little bit, that's where we get that nice kind of middle tone. And then when I pull the sun all the way to the edge of the floor plan screen, that's where you get that cool sunset effect, which could be impressive, but probably not something I need to show on every project because it does deepen some of these areas and it's hard to tell the definition between like the doors and the drawers and such. But at a quick glance, I mean, how different do these three renders look, even though they are identical? It's just the sun placement is different. Okay, so those are the kind of the rules about the sun. How did I turn the sun on? When I go into a perspective, when I'm in cycles, notice that I can go into the light bulb and just dialing up that sun properties just a little bit gives me the sun icon where I can move it around my plan. So remember, if I leave it above, it's cool. If I pull it a little bit away, you'll get that nice middle tone. If you pull it far away, it'll get really warm. Here I've left it kind of in the middle, but I purposely pulled it a little bit in so that way I could see the reflection coming in and it will reflect just a little bit on that backsplash that was placed on that wall with the range. We'll let this render in high quality so you can kind of see the final result. And it's almost there. Yeah, looks great. Looks great. Okay, so a couple techniques on how I got the sun where it was, but once you realize how easy that is and when is it warm and when is it cool, you can really control the output. Just super, super amazing. Now, if you'd like to add your own lighting, you can. It is not always required. If you notice our drawing today, I don't think I needed it, but you can definitely give a different impression. Some of your manufacturers might have lighting in their catalog. If they don't, you could always use the Room Fur catalog. Room Fur is just a sample catalog available in the local catalog list. And notice I'm just dragging and dropping these LED lights. You might have a favorite. I'm pulling an LED just so that I don't get like the puck light, really harsh effect. But I also want to show how quickly I can adjust these to place them exactly where I want. They don't go exactly in the location I needed. So I'm just going to jump to the elevations, right click on them and say up down so I can tuck them right underneath the wall cabinets. And in this scenario, again, it's not going to be perfect yet, but I'll spend a little bit of time just kind of adjusting these because they're quick to place and you can kind of stretch them to the width that you want. But let's see what it looks like. It's going to be pretty harsh against our quite shiny surface. That's the backsplash. But this is where we can start to think about how would I want to control these lights. I'm actually going to turn down artificial and natural and turn up the user defined. User defined lights, this is a perfect example of that. Anything you add, so like these LED lights would be user defined or user added. Okay, I reset that because I want to do a couple other things. I'm actually going to come into my my drafting settings. I want to kind of look real quick and find the Syncly lighting display setting. That display setting is just a much easier way to see where that actual light fixture is, because I would like to use in out and pull it away from the wall. Okay, this is the point where you're probably going to say, oh yeah, this is great, I can get that level of detail, or no way, Jose, I'm never going to spend this much time playing with this and getting those lights in there. This is really up to you if you want to show this level of detail, but it is possible. So now that I have it under the cabinet and pulled out from the wall a little bit, notice that when I come back in, let's render this so we can see it. Okay, looks a little bit more natural, if you would, and not quite as harsh against that backsplash. So here's a final render of what that can look like when you turn some of the artificial lighting down, that overall lighting, but turn up the user defined lighting or user added lighting, just to be able to create that look and feel of maybe what this looks like in the evening, to really help upsell these types of elements to your project. Again, not required, but definitely doable and hopefully easy to see. This was definitely something over the last few versions as we introduced cycles. We had to really dial in a lot of the settings to get those types of lights to really shine and show well. So in version 14.8, you'll see you can control them quite a bit. Now, let me come back to artificial lights because I just kind of went over them really quick a second ago. I'm going to come back into this project. And when I talk about artificial lights, I'm talking about the lights that appear in the ceiling regardless of what you do. Have you noticed these? Don't worry so much about the pendant lights, but I'm going to dial down that artificial setting, and that is actually what controls those circle lights, those puck lights that show up in the ceiling. Those are automatically defined when you use cycles. And sometimes you might not want that depending on the layout or depending on the view that you're showing, because you don't want the client to get confused by that lighting placement. It's literally to show a nice bright lighting scene, but it doesn't mean you have to use them on every project. So notice that with a combination of dialing up some of the other light settings, I can turn artificial all the way down and you won't see those circles in the ceiling anymore. So every project's a little bit different. Some of those smaller spaces like bathrooms, they can be really tricky to render because they tend to lean pretty dark, or rooms without doors and windows. Artificial lighting is really great because it does add a lot of clarity and brightness to them. But on certain projects where you really want to show the ceiling and not confuse people with all of those automatic lights, that's where we can control the artificial lighting. Hopefully that helps out. Okay, let's transition a little bit. We've got some of the lights set, whether you like to use the sun or manually place lights or use those artificial lights. Now we're going to change gears a little bit and let's talk about some of the new settings that came with cycles. One is when I go into the perspective view, notice that the gear now offers hidden line textures and textures with edges. Okay, textures with edges, although that's not a new feature to many of us because we've had it in our other rendering engines, it is new to cycles. So now to be able to show both the color with the line. I love to use the setting on things like front views. If you don't use front view color renders, these are great just to be able to show the nice simple line definition with a little bit of color. You can do one at a time. You can select multiple by holding down your control key to be able to see these, but just grabbing those placement zones really quickly. Sometimes you have to adjust it depending on how complex the project is. This one I wanted to focus on the cabinets and not that door. So now I could just use my rendering dashboard and move this over. Now these, I'm not usually looking for like super, super high quality with the texture, or it gives you a much lighter, simpler look, but the line can really sharpen the overall view. So to be able to show these sometimes on different output, especially with a contractor, it can just help define the space with a two-tone kitchen like this. So textures with edges, that is now available in Cycles. Here's an example of that initial perspective and what that can look like if you'd like to show some of those line details. Now, there's also a fast rendering mode that is new to version 14.8. It's available in that same setting that we were just using a second ago, the little gear, but notice it's under high quality. Before, we used to just have medium and high, but now you have a fast rendering mode. This gives you the lowest quality, but when I say low, I don't really mean low. I mean a good quality, but just super fast. The nice thing is this is also automatically built into 360s as well. So if you are creating 360 views for your client, which is basically just a number of perspective views being stitched together to show this in a full 360-degree view, I see a lot of designers like to demonstrate these on mobile devices, whether that's a phone or an iPad, to be able to really see the whole entire space. Notice you can come in and in the quality section, this is where we can change that setting to low fast. So low fast, once I go in and set this up, I'm going to hit send. This publishes that view to the cloud. So that way we will send you back a link in just a second. We'll wait for that to generate. You know, in the past, I never would really demonstrate this live very often because it used to take so much time. Now, if you dial up on those settings, this can take much longer, and you could then put them in things like Oculus glasses or higher end 3D glasses, but so often we're just looking at these on small devices like cell phones that this low fast setting is great. It's really great, especially if you're just like, am I standing in the right spot? Do I have the right height? Do I have all the settings right that I could just check it real quick and then come back and render it at a higher quality later? Look at that. In just that little bit of time, it's already publishing it. In just a second, it will open up in a browser on my screen, and I will pull that over in just a moment. And this is the link that we'll be able to share with a client to be able to give them the opportunity to look around this space. Since I'm on my laptop, I'm just using my mouse to kind of pan around, but I can already get a pretty good view in a good rendering quality, even though this was a fast rendering mode with a low quality setting. Now, we also keep a history of all the 360s you create. So I like to name these as I'm working on them, especially if I do a bunch of test ones. But now I could just click on this link and open up that 360 again, especially because in the last version of design, we removed the requirement of having to type in an email address. So you don't have to send this every single time to yourself or to the end consumer. You can just let that save in the history so you can get back to it really quick. So that fast rendering mode, I showed it a lot in the 360, but I use it all the time in my regular perspectives, just when I'm trying to work really quick, but I still want to see it in color. It works very, very fast. Okay, next up, let's talk a little bit more about textures. Although the project before was already complete, you're going to notice when you start a new project, we have new default colors. I'm so excited about this. This is a small but mighty thing, so be patient with me as I start to define a space. I'm just going to drag and drop a door, a few windows. These are doors and windows from the cloud. They're just going to come in as white. That's fine. And then a few cabinets. Again, I'm using the cloud. Even though some of your manufacturers might not have cabinets in the cloud yet, you're going to start seeing more and more of them added soon. Quite a few manufacturers are publishing their catalogs to the cloud to make them much, much easier to get the latest update, the latest pricing, and so on. But I'm using the cloud for this example just because I want to place these items really quick and I want to apply like the same door style and finish on all of them. And in this particular example, because they're cloud, I can go to Cloud Configurator and say, shaker door, this really contemporary handle, all in white. Okay, these are just going to be white shaker. Let me toss a countertop on top of everything, and let's look at this in 3D. Now notice, I did not pick any color except for the white shaker door. Notice the new default colors for the floor, the wall, the ceiling. They're all much more 2026 colors, hopefully. Even the countertop has a new default color that is more of a white countertop with a gray vein. I feel like that is already changing based on some of the really popular finishes I saw at KBIS earlier this year, but overall, you're going to notice like this neutral oak floor, neutral wall color, the whitest white we have available for the ceilings, and then the countertops are kind of a white with a gray vein. So many of these defaults, if you want to continue to edit them, you can change them in your preferences, but now you have new defaults to at least start a project really quick and not have to deal with, what did we have? That kind of boring gray on the walls, kind of a weird white on the ceiling, and the white ceramic tiles on the floor. It was just never finishes that we actually used, right? So those were long overdue just to be updated. Those defaults are now available in 14.8. Let's take a look at another project that's more complete because I want to highlight some of the textures in here. This was actually one of the displays at KBIS this year over in the Wellborn booth. But I'm not going to talk so much about the Wellborn cabinetry. I'm going to talk about the countertop that I used. And you'll notice that when I go to the countertop options, there's two I want to highlight. But did you notice I'm hanging out in a section called Cloud Textures? Cloud Textures is pretty new. We've had the catalog textures forever and ever, but Cloud Textures, we have a default materials area with marbles and granites and quartz and stone, but we also can add manufacturer textures. So notice Cambria was the first to add their textures to the Cloud Textures library. So if I come in and pick this Pendle Hill as an example, and let's take a look at that in a render. I have a couple named views set up already. If you're not familiar with these, just when you create a render, you can name them in the bottom right-hand corner. But let's let this render to high quality. And this is matched with a tile backsplash as well, but looks very realistic. So when you're looking for certain textures for countertops, definitely don't forget in the Cloud Textures, there is a kind of a generic texture library available in there, as well as the Cambria textures that have really nice big repeats, real looking textures. You don't have to go hunt endlessly on the web for the latest and greatest texture from any manufacturer anymore. Much, much easier. Okay. All this work, how do we present all of these beautiful renderings the fastest as possible? I'm actually going to use that same project again, but I'm going to leverage this a couple ways. And let me go ahead and do a different view, just kind of looking into this very small space, but what a cool scullery storage area off of a kitchen. Love it. I've got a couple views in here that are saved, and think about how often you want to show these views and kind of have them pre-curated for a presentation coming up. I'm going to go ahead and do these in high quality and notice that once these are completed or finished rendering, and I just did these in the high slow, once I go in, I'm going to go ahead and name them so I remember what view is what, so I can see both walls. I'm going to save them to the Flex Cloud. That Flex Cloud button will appear if your company has activated Flex. And what this does is it gives you the ability to view these renders from the cloud. Right now, I'm looking at this in my project, but notice here's that render where I can open up and I can see the two walls, or I've got different views from other directions that I saved earlier. But these, instead of saving them to a folder or saving them to my desktop or forgetting where I saved them, I can have them just saved to the cloud. And here's the power behind this. Let me close this project. Let's say that I save this. I'm done. I've got those ready to go for my appointment next time I see that client. So I'm going to be able to either go into the Flex Cloud, which when you have Flex activated for your company, it's the first screen that shows up when you go to log in. And you'll notice that any of the projects that I have saved in here, here's that project we were just working on. I have documents for that particular project. When I open that up, there's those 3 renders that I just did. So now I can visualize them really quickly or just check and make sure I've got them. But even more powerful, because they're saved to the cloud, I can actually go out to the web and I can access all of these things. So notice I'm going out in a browser, going to flex.cloud, logging in with my Syncly account, and I have access to view all my projects. Now I can't edit projects this way, but I can view all the assets or the details that I've saved in these projects. So imagine this could be on a different computer. This could be on an iPad. This could be as I'm out and about working with a client and not lugging my big, heavy machine laptop with me. This could be something really easy and making it just much more lightweight. And we're saving all sorts of documents on all different projects. You have access to all of them. You can see them in the documents area or based on each specific project, making it a lot easier to kind of navigate or manage the requests that you're probably getting all the time, whether client is asking for an image of something, or maybe you just left your desk and the installer is calling and needs an image or a floor plan of something. If you saved it to Flex, it would be really easy to access and get to from anywhere. So if you don't have Flex yet, it is something we started rolling out last year. It is available to anybody in North America that has Design Flex, and you have to just be at least on version 14.2. Hopefully now that you've seen some of the new rendering capabilities in 14.8, you'll want to at least be on that version. But this is a setting that does need to be set up by your admin. You can just scan the QR code on the screen and it will take you to a form to request more information on turning on Flex. Flex is part of your subscription, so there's no additional charge for this. It's part of your software. So if you think this would be helpful to be able to visualize your projects and have access to them anywhere, definitely scan that code and let us know, and we'll send you some details. Looking ahead later this year, I want to make sure that you know about a really cool event we are putting together in October. We hope to see everybody in New Orleans. It's called Syncly Connect, and it's the first time that we're bringing together all of our different businesses across Syncly. So think all of our kitchen designers, kitchen manufacturers, all of our windows, doors, and glass, and flooring, and all the different business areas that we work with in our industry will all be coming together to talk about our software and getting the updates and latest and greatest on what we're working on. And we'd love to see you there. Registration's not open yet, but if you'd like to be the first to know when it is, you can scan this code to join the wait list. And we hope to see you a little bit later this year. I really appreciate that you took the time today to learn a little bit more about Design Flex, and we hope to see you in another session.